I have reorganized government departments to establish a dedicated State Department for Science, Research, and Innovation to support the urgent need to scale up STEM courses in our education system, strengthen innovation, promote research, and create a pool of high-level professionals in engineering and science. This structure will also help actualize the 2% research fund needed to make this ambition a reality. We must fund startups and deliberately scale up and commercialize innovation to create new companies. We must actualize We must actualize the National Research Fund, moving from the current 0.8% of GDP to 2% of GDP. This leaves us with a shortfall today of 180 billion. Progressively, we should grow the fund to 1 trillion over the next 10 years. We will mobilize domestic public resources, private investment, venture capital, and other private sector financing to drive this effort, because no nation rises above the abilities of its citizens. Let me repeat that. Gentlemen and ladies, no nation rises above the abilities of its citizens. And we must promote a culture of enterprise so that Kenyan companies can cross borders. The example of Safaricom's M-Pesa, growing from a local solution into a global financial platform, serving more than 70 million customers in 170 countries today. This demonstrates the possibilities we can unlock. Secondly, we must turn around our economy from a net importer to a net exporter of products, goods, and services. The most urgent being imports of food products that cost us 500 billion shillings every year. Just imagine. We are importing maize, wheat, rice, edible oil, to Kenya at a cost of 500 billion shillings every year. As I mentioned earlier, we have already made interventions to reduce imports of maize, sugar, edible oils, rice, wheat, but our efforts are undermined by the natural limits of rain-fed agriculture. We can no longer allow the clouds to determine whether our people eat or not. We are able to produce enough for domestic consumption and exports. Expanded modern irrigation is now necessity and the only path forward. We are endowed, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, with arable land, yet we all know only 15% of Kenya can support rain-fed agriculture. And this limited area is what we have relied on to feed the entire nation. While 85% of Kenya does not receive sufficient rainfall, if we harvested and stored rainwater, we can bring vast arable lands in these arid and semi-arid regions into productive use. With the dams, we can transform our arid and semi-arid areas into hubs of agricultural production, even in the absence of rainfall. We must never give up on the potential of these regions simply because they receive little rain. And we must never confuse the lack of rain with the lack of water. This is why we must build at least 50 mega dams nationwide, alongside 200 additional medium and small dams and thousands of micro dams to collect and store water, not only to secure our food supply, but to bring at least 2.5 million additional acres under irrigation within the next 5 to 7 years. Therefore, the commitment to harvest and store water is not simply about food and water security. It is a strategic, nation-shaping investment, one that underpins our aspiration to be a net exporter of agricultural products, underpins economic independence, rural prosperity, and sustainable development. The Ministry of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation, alongside all relevant agencies, have already mapped out precise locations of these dams. These projects span the breadth of our republic. Sorry. From the High Grand Falls, a mega dam on River Dawa in Mandera, Isiolo, Pasalinga Dam, Yata in Machakos, Singli Canal in Garissa, Soin Koru in Kisumu, Rumuruti in Laikipia, Thochi in Embu and Tharaka, Lowat in Turkana, Mahoya Dam, straddling Nyeri and Kirinyaga, Narosra in Narok, Aror in Elgeyo Marakwet. Others include Ndarugu in Kiambu, Kokwanyo in Homa Bay, Rare in Kilifi, Tongaren in Bungoma, and many more strategic sites nationwide. Mr. Speaker, expanded irrigation will also supply the volumes, consistency, and quality of raw materials required for our next economic frontier, which is agro-industrialization. Irrigation will produce the raw materials, and our SEZs, EPZs, and county aggregation and industrial parks will convert them into high-value products for national, regional, and global markets. Honorable members, energy is the lifeblood of any modern economy. No nation has developed without abundant, reliable, and affordable power. This is our third national priority. Although we have an installed capacity of 3,300 megawatts, the intermittence of solar and wind means our farm capacity is only 2,300 megawatts, far below what the Kenya of the present, let alone tomorrow, will require. To drive domestic electrification, industrial manufacturing, e-mobility, green industrialization, digital expansion, and a technology-enabled future, we must dramatically expand power generation. Kenya is blessed with diverse, largely underexploited renewable sources, including geothermal, solar, hydro, wind, and nuclear. To undertake large-scale value addition, agro-processing, manufacturing and industrialization, sufficient, affordable, and reliable energy is a top imperative. Modern technologies, such as data centers and artificial intelligence, require large-scale energy supply. To modernize our economy, leverage on technology to create new opportunities, and to turn our agriculture and natural resources into products, manufacturing and industrialization consume many megawatts of energy. As a result, we have to generate an additional 10,000 megawatts in the next 7 years, so as to move our country to the next level and undertake the transition necessary for our growth. Our fourth national priority is transport and logistics. As the region's economic and diplomatic hub, home to the United Nations' largest office and only office in the Global South, and the sixth largest economy in Africa, Kenya must maintain world-class seaports, airports, highways, and digital corridors. Efficient transport and logistics are the backbone of our competitiveness. They accelerate national development, connect products to markets, move goods and services, lower the cost of doing business, and will reinforce Kenya as the aviation and commercial capital of East and Central Africa. History teaches us that nations rise on the strength of transport and logistics. Japan's post-war revival, enabled by strategic road expansion, is a clear example. From only 2,000 kilometers of road, they constructed over 1 million kilometers of paved road in 7 decades. We in Kenya, you know, we have only constructed 22,000 kilometers over a relatively similar period. To scale up, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, our transport and logistics program, the Ministry of Roads and Transport have already mapped out a comprehensive network of 2,500 kilometers of highway for dualing and 28,000 kilometers of road to be tarmacked over the next 10 years. We will onboard private-public partnership in the modernization of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Mombasa and Lamu Airport, and sort out the challenges facing Kenya Airways by next year. This work is already in progress. Next week, I will launch the dualing of the 170-kilometer Rironi-Naivasha-Nakuru-Mau Summit Road. On the same day, I will break ground on the dualing of the 58-kilometer Rironi-Maimayu-Naivasha Road. The gridlock that paralyzes these roads every day, especially on weekends and holidays, will soon, by God's grace, be a thing of the past. Additionally, roads earmarked for dualing include Muthaiga Kiambu Ndumberi, Machakos Junction Mariakani, Mau Summit Kericho Kisumu, Kisumu Busia, Mau Summit Eldoret Malaba, Athi River Namanga, Karatina Nanyuki Isiolo, Makutano Embu Meru Maua, Mtwapa Malindi Mombasa, all the way to Lungalunga, Kericho Kisii Migori Isabenia, and Nakuru Nyahururu Karatina Kisii Oyugis Ahero. The Northern Bypass, James Gishuru Roads, Bomas Karen Gong, and Bomas Ongata Rongai Kiserian, including Gong Isinya and Naivasha to Kikuyu, among many other key corridors nationwide. This infrastructure drive will also include extending the standard gauge railway from Naivasha to Kisumu and eventually to Malaba. And that exercise, ladies and gentlemen, is beginning in January. In just 2 months, we will be beginning that process. Honorable members, estimates indicate that achieving Honorable members, estimates indicate that achieving these 4 priorities will require at least 5 trillion. This is undeniably a large sum. Some may see it as unrealistic, even audacious, for a country like ours. But allow me to recall President John F. Kennedy's words in 1962 as he rallied America to reach the moon. And this is what he said, and I quote, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone." These 4 projects are our national imperatives, commitments we must embrace without hesitation, not because they are easy, not because they are cheap, but because they are absolutely necessary, because they are worthy of our time. This is the assignment of our generation. This is the purpose for this administration and this parliament, the 13th parliament. And this is the moment we must rise up to. Which brings us to the next question. Given our fiscal constraints, how shall we finance these transformative projects and do so sustainably? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, lies in 2 key financing vehicles: the National Infrastructure Fund and the Sovereign Wealth Fund. As noted earlier, our development ambitions require sustained, large-scale investment in education, in roads, in energy, water systems, logistics, transport, and digital network. Yet, our fiscal space is narrow. We cannot continue funding essential infrastructure through unsustainable borrowing and burdening taxpayers with additional taxes. But neither can we afford to postpone these imperatives without risking our future. There is need to be innovative in the use of our national revenues, or the national revenues at our disposal. There is need to deploy our national assets available to us in creating public-private partnerships that will crowd in the enormous pool of private sector resources available regionally and globally. This is why we will establish the National Infrastructure Fund, whose architecture will be underpinned by the reforms in the Government-Owned Enterprises Bill, passed by this August House, that I will sign into law tomorrow. This fund is the strategic solution that will provide a framework to innovatively scale up our resources to match our ambition. It will fulfill our manifesto commitment to rebuild Kenya's infrastructure while reducing reliance on tax and debt. We will do this by using budgeted resources prudently and introducing a financing architecture that leverages capital markets, diversifies ownership through unlocking of national assets through privatization, and use PPP frameworks to channel private capital into public priorities. For decades, Kenya has privatized major public assets, from Kenya Airways to KenGen, from Kenya Re to Safaricom. Yet, we cannot point to enduring national assets built from privatization proceeds, because the funds were absorbed into budgets and spent. The National Infrastructure Fund will break this cycle. All proceeds from privatization will be ring-fenced, preserved, and reinvested into new infrastructure and wealth-creating assets. When ownership shifts to the private sector for efficiency, the benefits to the public will not diminish, they will multiply. For every shilling invested from privatization proceeds, we aim to attract 10 shillings from long-term investors drawn from pension funds, sovereign partners, private equity, and development finance institutions. This multiplier will allow us to build critical infrastructure without adding to tax or debt burden. This model is proven. Australia's Future Fund, Singapore's Temasek, and UAE's Mubadala demonstrate that commercially run public investment funds can grow national wealth and deliver transformative infrastructure. The National Infrastructure Fund is therefore more than a financing tool. It is a generational strategy, preserving value, mobilizing capital, accelerating delivery, and ensuring Kenya becomes stronger, wealthier, and more competitive. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, our Constitution under Article 201C stipulates that the burdens and benefits of the use of resources and public borrowing shall be shared equitably between present and future generations. In essence, when we use natural resources or borrow, we must ensure future generations are not left poorer. That is why, alongside the National Infrastructure Fund, we will establish the Sovereign Wealth Fund to give full effect to the constitutional principle of intergenerational equity. A portion of all royalties from natural resources and a portion of proceeds from privatization of national assets will be invested in the fund. This fund will rest on 3 pillars. Number 1, savings, to be invested for the future, as countries like Norway, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia have done with trillion-dollar funds. Number 2, stabilization, a buffer against global shocks, including commodity volatilities, pandemics, and geopolitical disruptions to ensure fiscal stability. And number 3, infrastructure. A carefully managed share will be invested in commercial terms to attract private capital to national projects while growing public wealth. History has already warned us. Along our coast region, titanium deposits have been exploited and depleted. And because we lacked a sovereign wealth framework, future generations will inherit nothing from the resources that we got from titanium. We cannot repeat this mistake. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, that is the scale of our national ambition. This is the blueprint for financing it prudently and responsibly. To shape this vision, I have engaged sincerely with leaders across the political spectrum. I've engaged many members of parliament, many governors, community leaders, and with Kenyans from all walks of life. I discussed this vision with the late Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga in the presence of Professor Anyang' Nyong'o, who reminded me that no nation has industrialized without roads, energy, and food security. I have engaged former President Uhuru Kenyatta, who emphasized the necessity of scaling up infrastructure investments. Honorable members, allow me to express profound gratitude to the 13th Parliament for your outstanding contribution, your foresight, your consistency, focus, and commitment on what is good for Kenya. The progress made in the last 3 years would not have been possible without your legislative agility, principled oversight, and commitment to national interest. When the history of this generation is written, this House, the 13th Parliament, will occupy a full and proud chapter. Your decisions are recorded not only in debates or statutes, but in the lives lived, progress of every Kenyan that has been achieved. For this, I extend my deepest gratitude and appreciation. I also extend heartfelt thanks to hard-working Kenyans who have diligently fulfilled their civic duty to the nation, giving life to the constitutional values of equity, social justice, and sustainable development. You Kenyans have shouldered the weight of nation building. Future generations will feel the impact of your sacrifice, and they will honor you as the generation that helped change the trajectory of our republic. As I conclude, I reiterate that those of us in leadership must bear in mind one critical lesson. Leaders are not ultimately judged by the vision they carry, or the statements they make, or the mantra they repeat. They are judged by the actions they take, the values they generate, the difference they make, and the impact they leave in the lives of the people. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, let history record that this generation refused to be timid, that we chose ambition over fear, action over excuses, and progress over false comfort of low expectation. Let it be said that when Kenya stood at crossroads, we reached for the higher path. The work ahead is formidable, but so is the Kenyan spirit. This is our moment to lift Kenya to the next frontier. This is our moment to shape a nation worthy of its promise. This is our moment to rise. Honorable members, it is now my pleasure to submit to Parliament the following 3 reports as required by the Constitution. Number 1, reports on all measures taken and progress achieved in the realization of the national values as I have espoused. Number 2, report on progress made in fulfilling the international obligations of the Republic. And number 3, the report of the state of security of the country. Now, therefore, I hand over the reports to the Speaker of the Senate and the Speaker of the National Assembly, and I thank you for your attention. God bless you, and God bless our great country, Kenya.
Honorable members, let us be upstanding. Your Excellency the President, the Right Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, honorable members and distinguished guests, we have now come to the conclusion of the business of the day, and it is now time to adjourn. The Senate stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 25th of November, 2025 at 2:30 p.m. in the Senate chamber. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the President, Right Honorable Speaker of the Senate, honorable members of the National Assembly, the National Assembly now stands adjourned until Tuesday, 25th November 2025 at 2:30 p.m. May I take this opportunity to invite all honorable members and our guests to a reception at the Parliament courtyard. May I also request all honorable members and our guests to remain standing in your places until the procession of His Excellency the President and the speakers leave the chamber. I thank you.
Tazama ilivyo.